Welcome to Your Need to Know. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and today we're going to be talking about the Turning Point Suffragists Memorial with the Executive Director, Patricia Wirth. Thank you, Pat, so much for being here.
Well, thank you, Catherine. It's always good to be on one of your programs, and you've been one of our staunchest supporters, so I'm very grateful to be here today.
Well, so this is an update. We've had you on talking about this. You are relentless in pursuing the funding to build this very important memorial here in Northern Virginia, which is where the Occoquan Workhouse is. Give us some background. Let's not assume every one of our viewers understands what the suffragist movement is, why this memorial needs to be in Northern Virginia, and what makes the Occoquan site so specific.
Well, one of the challenges that I have in this position is the fact that most people don't know the history of the suffrage movement. And the reason for that is it never made it into our mainstream textbooks for our children. For myself, for example, it wasn't something that I'd ever read about. But in fact, the suffrage movement started in Seneca Falls, New York in 1848. And over a period of 72 years, there were over 5 million women who were involved in the movement. And what our organization, our mission is to educate, inspire, and empower present and future generations to remain vigilant for equal rights, because that's what the suffragists were trying to do. They wanted equality for women, and they felt that one of the ways that was absolutely necessary was to be able to have the vote. The reason that the area where we're looking to build a memorial is so important is because in the early 20th century, there was a suffrage organization, the National Women's Party, who were looking at different ways to get attention, to try to get then President Wilson to come over to the light side from the dark side in supporting women's rights. And he just really wouldn't hear of it. He just said, well, you need to go state by state. We don't need to have a national amendment. And so in January of 1917, out of frustration, they started picketing the White House. And to begin with, the president just kind of ignored them, would tip his hat when he was going in and out, invite them in for tea. But World War I was on the horizon, right, and that kind of changed the flavor of how things were going. And in June of 1917, he had these women arrested for bogus charges of obstructing traffic. And they were just, they weren't even making any noise, they were just on the sidewalk. And these women they refused to pay fines because they said they hadn't done anything illegal. And what happened was they were put in prison in both the DC Prison Systems facility in DC as well as the Occoquan Workhouse in Lorton. On the night of November 14th, 1917, there was a group of women, 32 women who came in by train that were being processed through. And the superintendent, John Whitaker, basically told his guards, you do not need to be nice to these women, take it from here. These women were beaten, they were brutalized, they were, it was just a horrific, horrific situation. Now, all the women that were housed there were in inhumane conditions, but on this particular night, these women were terrorized, they were beaten, one unconscious, one woman had a heart attack, they wouldn't get her medical care. And when word leaked out about this, it became a major turning point in the suffrage movement, and it forced President Wilson to go to Congress and say, perhaps it's time now for us to do something about this national amendment. And our memorial will be sited in Occoquan Regional Park, which is part of the historic prison grounds where these women were kept. It's down the hill from the Workhouse Arts Center, and very appropriate place for this national memorial to be built. And this memorial will recognize and honor and commemorate the 5 million women who were instrumental in getting us the vote over this 72-year period that most people don't know about.
True, and even though it's located in Northern Virginia and not on the National Mall, it's still a national monument to the entire suffrage movement and all of the women who were a part of that.
Absolutely.
And so the design of the memorial really takes into account the thing that you want it to be sort of not just a statue, but a living memorial. Education is going to be part of this, and programming will be part of this.
That's correct. We will have 19 stations, and obviously to represent the 19th Amendment. And these stations, information stations, will tell the entire 72-year history. So visitors will be able to walk through the memorial, and they'll be able to read and see both narrative and design work that will tell the story that way. And there will be an informational, interactive, we aren't exactly sure 100% what form it's going to take, but somewhere where visitors can do some interactive information and look things up. And of course, that information will always be on our website, no matter where you are anyway.
Well, I think it's really important, too, because to your point, it's not included in the history books. It's not being taught to public school children as if it was insignificant or unimportant. And because so few people know about the events surrounding the suffrage movement, it's hard to get people's attention as to why this needs to be built. There's also a misunderstanding about the difference between suffragettes and suffragists, and people get confused about that. So when you say suffragists, people are like, oh, you've got it wrong. You mean suffragettes. I'm like, no, I don't have it wrong. I know American history. It's suffragists.
That's correct. The suffragettes were women that were part of the British movement during the same time frame. And they were engaged in acts of violence themselves. I mean, they would throw rocks through windows, they would start fires, they would put bombs in mailboxes, and they did things like along those lines. And so the American movement did not want to be associated with that. And although they were considered militants in the sense that they held marches and rallies and things of that nature, which had never been done in this country before.
Not by women.
Not by, no, not exactly, not by women. Not by women. They were considered militant, but not in the sense that the British women were. So the British women are the suffragettes, and the American women that were fighting for the vote are called suffragists.
And that's why I think it's so critically important. The average American couldn't tell you what the difference is, and nor do they think there is a difference. They just think that Americans are saying it wrong.
Right.
And so let's talk about the silent sentinels, because actually, to your point, they were very much in the Gandhi mode of thinking as far as they just stood vigil outside the White House gates. They were dressed in white. They had sashes. They had signs. But basically, it was a nonviolent protest.
That's correct. It was nonviolent, except the violence that was perpetrated against them. That's where the violence was. That's where all the violence in the suffrage movement in the United States took place, was violence that was perpetrated against these women. These women did not instigate any of it at all. And in fact, the methods that were used, the picketing, the marches, and that sort of thing, a lot of people don't realize that Martin Luther King Jr. Took a page from the suffragists in how he did things, and as did Gandhi, in doing this nonviolent protesting.
It makes sense. It really does.
Yes.
And I think that the Night of Terror, to which you refer, I mean, it's called the Night of Terror. There have been some documentaries done about it. There's a documentary called Iron-Jawed Angels, which for people who really don't know the story of the suffrage movement, that's not the entire movement, but there are things online, on YouTube, on your website that will give people more of a background.
Correct. Iron-Jawed Angels, I think you can actually see it on YouTube. I think it's available on YouTube. I know you can buy it for less than $10 from Amazon if you want to get your own copy, that sort of thing. But it is an eye-opener for people that really don't know anything. And in fact, I buy that video by the dozen and frequently give them out to people that don't know anything about it. And I recommend that they take a look at it, because it's rather jaw-dropping when you take a look at this and see exactly what happened. One of our historians, she's a nationally renowned historian, actually was the person who reviewed that video for its historical accuracy. And other than a kind of made-up romantic interlude that really didn't take place.
It just was a plot device?
Yes, plot device. It was historically accurate what happened. So what you saw was exactly what did take place.
So moving forward and trying to get people's attention, especially nationally, I think a lot of fundraising has been done locally, but the fact of the matter is, you know, this is a memorial for everybody in the United States to come and visit. I think previously you had talked about trying to include it as part of a constitutional trail.
Correct, and we have established the Constitution Trail, and this is something that will start at the National Archives in Washington, because that's where the Constitution is housed. And I like to kind of visually think about, okay, you get on a boat and you come on down the Potomac River and you stop at Mount Vernon, because Washington was the president of the Constitutional Convention, and of course the first president under the Constitution. And then you get back on your boat and you go down to Gunston Hall, where the home of George Mason, who effectively was the author of the Bill of Rights. Now, the Bill of Rights that he initially wrote was for the Commonwealth of Virginia, but it was adopted by the majority, if not all, of the 13 colonies for their respective states. And in fact, he was one of only 3 delegates to the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia who did not sign.
I know there was
he didn't sign it because they didn't have the Bill of Rights in there. Yeah. And it was really unfortunate that he, in many ways, that he didn't sign it, because it affected his very close relationship with James Madison.
It did.
It affected their relationship, and it was about a dozen years later when the Bill of Rights was incorporated into our Constitution. But after you go to Gunston Hall, you're going to get down on that boat again, and then you're going to come up the Occoquan River, and you will stop at the Turning Point Suffragist Memorial, and we will represent the 19th Amendment. And then we're going to put you on a bus, and we're going to take you out to Montpelier, James Madison's home. So where they have a phenomenal Constitution organization out there, a building. They do research on the Constitution just perpetually. They have scholars from all over the world that come there to do research. It's really very exciting. It's very, very exciting.
Well, I think incorporating it into a wider tourism package is very helpful, because it helps people understand, well, how would I get to Occoquan, or why would I go there, and whatever. But you're giving the memorial some context, and you're also making it easy transportation-wise to get people there and back.
Right.
And I think people coming to Virginia are looking for those historical opportunities, because we're a very historical state. We are steeped in history, but up to this point, not really the history of women in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So when we come back from our break, we're going to be talking with Pat Wirth further about the Turning Point Suffragist Memorial, to be located in Occoquan, Virginia, and how you can be involved and get engaged and help get this memorial built. So please join us after the break.
You know what, guys? There's a lot of tree branches and dry brush over here. We should probably move the bonfire over there.
I'm guessing Smokey liked that idea.
To Maddie, congrats on paying off all those student loans.
Finally, right?
How'd you manage that anyway?
I started tracking my spending, changed a couple of habits.
Wow, I'm kind of living paycheck to paycheck right now. I don't even know how I'm doing it.
Well, have you tried saving a little?
I want to, but where's that money going to come from? Bill collectors, they're the worst. Am I right?
When it comes to financial stability, don't get left behind.
Not home.
Get tools and tips for saving at feedthepig.org.
I come from a big family. I'm the oldest of 6. To me, being the first person to go to college, it's like setting a standard, you know? My little brother is 8 years old now. I challenge his curiosity. I challenge him to dream. I have to paint a picture for him that he can look up to and live up to and possibly be better than. My name is Jaquez, and I am your dividend.
Welcome back to Your Need to Know. I'm your host, Catherine Reed. Today we are talking about the Turning Point Suffragist Memorial with the Executive Director, Pat Wirth. Thank you so much for joining me, Pat.
Thank you.
So give us an update. You have been working on this for a long time, and there is much work to be done, many more donors, funders, lots more money that needs to be raised. But give us an update on where you are and what you've got planned for the upcoming 2018 calendar year.
Well, 2017 has been our best year ever, but fundraising is all about relationship building, and it really takes time to do that. And as we talked about earlier, we have the extra added challenge of people not knowing the history. And so it's very difficult to go up to somebody and say, you know, would you be interested in supporting us when they don't really know the history. So we have that added component. But we had a you know, the year's not over yet, but we have had a heck of a year. We started out, our organization was in the Women's March, and we weren't there protesting anything. We were there just supporting equality because our mission is about equal rights, and that was the sole reason for us to be there, was to just support the movement. But what was really interesting is how many women were dressed as suffragists that were there. I mean,
I saw some of the photos.
Tons of women that were dressed as.
Because they're very distinctive.
Yeah.
I mean, they were dressed because suffragists wore white, and they had the purple sashes, and so it's very distinctive what suffragists look like.
Yeah, they didn't always wear white in the winter, though. Sometimes, you know, it was too cold, but they definitely wore white in the summer. So I have my summer outfit that's white for sure. And we held a number of interesting fundraisers this year. The Dulles Regional Chamber of Commerce has a Dulles Executive Women Group, and they did a fundraiser for us that was very successful. We had our first, you know, true gala in June that was very successful. We did a play. We had singers. It was really a lot of fun. In November, we did a joint program at the Workhouse Arts Center with them about the Night of Terror, because that's where it took place. And that was a tremendous program. We had standing room only. We had to be careful that the fire marshal wasn't going to come in and shut us down. We had over 200 people that came. And we did a reenactment with women who were taking the persona of some of the women who were there that night. We had a string quartet from New York City that was premiering a new piece on the movement that came down from New York and played. We had a choral group, Capital Harmonia, that came and sang, and we did a sing-along. It was a really, really great event. We got a grant from Dominion Energy this year for $25,000.
Wow.
So we were very pleased to have received that. But we have a long way to go. I mean, this is a $2 million memorial. And, but we're looking to the future, and as I have told you before, we will have something for August of 2020, which is the centennial anniversary of ratification of the 19th Amendment. And toward that end, we are already getting quotes from civil engineers on a site plan, because it takes about a year to get the site plan drafted and submitted and approved and back and forth and all those good things that you do when you do
constructing anything.
Yeah, you know, when you do development, that type of thing. So we've kind of got that in the works. We're going to be doing a social media campaign that's actually ready to go. We haven't quite figured out exactly when we're going to launch it. And of course, the success of that is when we send it out for people to then continue to send it out for us. But it's, I really like it. The name of the campaign is 20 for 2020.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, and so we're not looking for enormous amounts of money. We aren't trying to be greedy. We're just asking people to, you know, take a look at it and to perhaps we felt that could be an affordable amount type thing. So we're going to be doing that. We're looking at a couple of different ideas for, I don't want to exactly call them galas, but in the past we've done Silent Sentinel Awards. We're looking at possibly revamping that and having more than one awardee, because there are a lot of women today who are helping other women. And, you know, once again, we're about equal rights, not necessarily just women's equal rights, although that's kind of what our focus is right now. But the fact is we would like to see equality across the board in every flavor and design of everything that needs to be done.
I agree with that.
So for now we're really focusing on women. So we're looking at doing that as a possible type of a program. And we'll just see what happens. I've been working with now for over a year and a half, and once again, as I said, it takes a long time to develop relationships, working with the General Federation of Women's Clubs.
Oh, yes, indeed.
And these women were very instrumental
pioneers
in getting the vote back,
yes, they were.
Back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
Their organization, I don't remember the exact incorporation, but it was in the 1890s. Mm-hmm. And I've done research in their archives, and I've read their articles. And to begin with, the articles are very pro and con. This is maybe why women should get the vote, or maybe they shouldn't get the vote. So I started finding articles in 1909 about the pros and cons. And then in 1914, after Carrie Chapman Catt, who was a well-known leader in the suffrage movement, gave a very impassioned speech at one of their national meetings. And after that meeting, the leaders of the Federation voted to support suffrage overall. And they had about 2 million members back then. And so in my mind, it's
right.
I think they had a lot to do with helping us get to 1920 and getting the amendment passed. These women were very instrumental. So we're working with them. I've addressed one of their boards of director meetings up in Massachusetts, and they have regional organizations, state organizations, and local chapters.
Right.
And so I've done that, and we're talking about me coming in and addressing their national meeting in June in St. Louis. We're also going to be working in the same context with the Delta Sigma Theta sorority. Phyllis Randall, who is the chairwoman of the Board of Supervisors in Loudoun County, mm-hmm. and I will be meeting with them in January to look and to see what they might be able to do. And the reason for that is in 1913, there was the first Women's Rights March in Washington. And at Howard University, there was the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, and some of those women wanted to march. And their charter didn't allow women to participate in things like that. So 22 very brave women broke away, and they started the Delta Sigma Theta sorority. And that was one of the first things that they did, was that they marched in this parade. Not without controversy. These women were African American. There was a lot of controversy about African American women marching in that march because there were a lot of Southern women, and racism was alive and well after the Civil War still. And look where we are today. I mean,
right.
Please. So,
right.
So it was still very raw back in 1913, but nonetheless, these women, African American women, played a huge role in suffrage. They were, they started out obviously as abolitionists, as did a lot of the other suffrage movements with white women who were abolitionists. They were Quakers, and they were violently opposed to slavery. So they worked together. So they were a very big part of it as well. I'm going to be addressing a large regional group of Jewish women at the end of the year. There were many, many Jewish women who were involved in the suffrage movement. So we're looking at these other groups because they don't realize that their foremothers were very active in the suffrage movement. And once again, it's part of the education process that we have to go through.
And they should stake out that legacy. I do think that it shouldn't be just a matter of there were women who got together and we got the vote, but Jewish women and African American women, they need to stake their claim, plant a flag in what their forebears did, in fact, to get the vote for all women in the United States.
Right, and they were very, very instrumental. So I'm not an historian, as you know, but I have learned so much, and every day I learn something else. And I have the good fortune of being surrounded by historians, and I learn a lot. One of the other things that we've done, because this is a national memorial, and I don't remember whether we've talked much about this, but we've also established a national board. And we now have over 20 women in 20 different states around the country who are on our national board. Many of them are historians themselves. They're professors at major colleges in history and other interested women. I've got the president of the Federation in the state of Connecticut is on my board, and they're going out and they're telling people about the suffrage movement, and they're telling people about Turning Point and what we're trying to accomplish. And I can tell you unequivocally, Catherine, every time they have a talk and they do a speech, everybody is just shocked that they don't know this.
I know.
They're shocked that they don't know this history. And so they're very supportive of our moving forward and doing this national memorial.
So how is the current climate going to help you? I mean, there's this, the word of 2017
Feminism.
was feminism, right?
Yes.
Feminism. There's the Me Too movement. There is the Women's March. There is so much going on.
Right.
I mean, are women finally stepping up to not just claim their place today, but are they ready to claim their place in history? I guess that's the question we really need to ask. Is this climate going to help us say, you need to know your own history? We need to teach the history of women in this country.
Right. Well, our memorial, this can really be a legacy for people who really care about equality, especially for women. Our memorial has naming rights on different levels. For as little as $1,000, you can have your name in perpetuity on our donor wall. And you know what? I'm grateful for $5. I mean,
right.
we are just grateful for anyone that can support us. I have a lot of people say, well, given the movement for the march, for example, can't you just get 2 million women to give you $1? And it's like, well, I would love to do that if you can tell me how to get to those 2 million
That's
women.
right.
I'll do it.
Give me their email address,
yeah,
right?
So yes, I mean, there's a lot of ways to skin this cat, so to speak. But it's a matter of getting through to the right people. So, I'm constantly looking for referrals. I'm constantly looking for introductions to people with whom our project would resonate, that sort of thing. Our website, gives you information. If anybody goes on the website, if they want to reach me, they can go through the website. It'll come to me. So if they've got any ideas for me, I follow up on every lead I get.
I believe you because I've known you a long time. And thank you so much for being on the show, Pat. Again, I can't say enough how much women really should reclaim their place in history, and it should be taught. And this information about the Turning Point Suffragist Memorial is something that you really need to know.